Hey everyone, we're going to create dice game simulations using a spreadsheet. We're going to simulate 10 turns in each of these 3 games. Actually, we're only going to do 2 of them in this video, and the third one we'll do on our own in class. You're going to use a new sheet for each game. I'm going to use Google Sheets to show you this. The first game, on your turn, you roll 3 dice, and you score a point for each die, which shows a 5 or a 6, and we'll total the score for the game after those 10 turns. So let's start here. I've got a blank sheet. I've renamed this sheet to be Game 1, and I've put a title at the top. And I'm just going to put some headings in. I'm going to have Roll 1, Roll 2, and Roll 3. And for each one of these rolls, I'm going to randomly choose a value between 1 and 6. That's the rand between function. It has a low and a high value. I'm going to choose 1 and 6 as the limits of that. Now, rather than typing that formula over and over, I'm going to highlight I'm going to grab right here. See this little cursor changes to be a plus sign when I go over top of the little blue box. And I'm going to drag it across. And now each of these has exactly the same formula in it. And that's one way to do it. Another way is I'm going to hold down Shift on my keyboard and use my arrow keys to highlight. And I'm going to highlight 10 rows, again, all 3 columns. 10 rows goes down to number 11 here because 1 is already used up. And I'm going to press Control D on my keyboard, D for down. That fills the formula down in the very same way as if I had grabbed that little box at the corner. So I now have simulated 10 rounds of 3 dice rolls each. What I'm going to do is now score. Let me just go back to my rules. You score a point for each die, which shows a 5 or a 6. So I'm going to have a score for each one. I'm going to have a Roll 1 score. I'm going to have a Roll 2 score. And I'm going to have a Roll 3 score. So each value will either be a 1 or a 0. It'll be a 1 if this value is 5 or 6. It'll be a 0 if this value is 1, 2, 3, or 4. We're going to use an if statement to do this, an if function. So press the equals sign, and then if bracket. And it gives us a little rule here. It tells us the parameters. A logical expression, that is a conditional that evaluates to either true or false. In this case, I want to know, is A2 at least 5? Is it 5 or 6? That is it greater than or equal to 5? That's the condition that it will check. It's currently false, as it's indicating right now. But if the value is true, I want to get 1 point. If the value is false, I want 0 points. That's what those 2 extra spots are. So the 3 parameters then, the conditional, the true value, and the false value. I'm going to press enter now. And it has calculated that I get 0 points for the value 2. I'm going to double click here and show you. See, it highlighted the cell that it's referencing back there. A2 is right there. All right, now I need the same formula here, but referencing B2. Now, when you fill this, spreadsheets are very clever, and they realize that you probably don't mean to continuously point at A2. You probably mean to point at the next one over to the right. That is, these are called relative references. This one points 1, 2, 3 spots over this way to the left. And so the same formula must point 3 spots, 1, 2, 3 spots over to here, to this spot. Let's check it out. If I double click here, you can see it's correctly highlighting B2. And the same one here, this one is going to highlight C2 right there. And you can see the formula has adjusted at the top. That's true filling across. It's also true filling down. I use my keyboard again, Control D for down. Control R for right and D for down. Now there's a 6, for example. That's a point. 5, that's a point. 3 right here, no points. So this tells me the total, it tells me the score for each die roll. And I'm going to make a total column over here. I'm going to add up each of those scores from columns D, E, and F. I'm going to use the sum function for that. You can just add them up one at a time if you want, D2 plus E2 plus F2, but a sum is nice. I'm going to type in D2 colon F2. That is everything from D2 to F2 and everything in between. There's the formula there, D2 to F2. Notice it capitalized things for me. I didn't have to do that myself. And I got no points in that round. That's not very good. Let me fill that down, that formula. Looks like I got a nice distribution of points. Sometimes 1, sometimes 2. And you'll notice that it re-randomizes these values here. These are my random values. It re-randomizes them every time I do anything, every time I change one of the formulas. Okay, that's cool. And let's do the game total at the bottom here, which is going to be the sum of these values. I'm going to show you another shortcut. Oops, sorry, I need my equal sign first. Equals sum bracket. Rather than typing in G2 to G11, I can just click and highlight. Once I type in sum and open my bracket, I can highlight the range that I want. Looks like I scored 14 points in this game. Nice. Is that typical? I don't know. I guess we'll have to see in the next phase as we do some more things. You can do a little bit of cleanup here to make things pretty if you want to. And if you want, you can even sort of hide the middle score stuff if you like. Okay, that's the first game. We have rolled a bunch of times, and then we made some calculations based on the results of the rolls, including a total for each round. Let's read game 2. In game 2, we're going to roll 3 dice again. If any die shows a 1, you get an additional roll, and your score is the highest number that you rolled during the turn. We'll total our score after 10 turns. So again, we're going to roll 3 dice. Let's start with that. I'm going to make a new sheet. Oops. Get that out of the way there. I'll rename it in a bit. And hey, you know what? Okay, there we go. Let's rename. This is exactly the same formula as before, so why don't I just copy this? All of this, maybe all of this even with the headings and everything. Go over to game 2 and just paste it in there. Let's see what happens. Hey, the formula is copied over nicely. They don't reference any cells. They're just it just generates a random number, so I don't even need to redo that. That's awesome. Okay, so I've got my 3 rolls. Now sometimes I'm going to need a 4th roll, and so what I'm going to do this time, just because I know what's coming, I'm going to put a roll 4 in, which is a maybe roll. I don't know that it's going to happen. Control R to fill to the right, and it's a roll that I may or may not get to use. So that one is an iffy roll. We'll see. Let's read our rules again. If any die shows a 1, you get an additional roll. How will I check to see if any die shows a 1? Well, in the last game, we checked to see if a die showed a 5 or a 6 by sort of counting it, by giving it a value here. So why don't I do the same thing? Roll 1 is 1, roll 2 is 1, or roll 3 is 1. This is one way to approach this. It's not the only way, but this is a pretty good way. So I'm going to check, is roll 1 equal to the number 1? It's not right now, but let's see what happens in the long run here. If roll 1, let's see, A2 is equal to 1, then I want to count this as a yes. I'm going to put the number 1 there. Otherwise, it's a no, and I put the number 0. The reason we choose 1 and 0, it's sort of like counting the number of successes. And I'm going to fill that across with Control R and down with Control D. Oh, I didn't get very many 1s. There's a 1, there's a 1, there's a 1. And now I'm going to check, did I roll a 1 in this round? And this is going to be equal to the sum of these 3 values here. I'm just going to fill it down and then I'll explain. 1, 2, 3 values here, which are based on these 3 rolls. And the question is, did I roll a 1? If any of these values is not 0, if it's 1, 2, or even 3, then I did roll a 1, perhaps more than 1. So now for the last, most complicated part. Do I include this value in my maximum calculation? If this number is not 0, I want to include this value. If this number is 0, then I do not include this value. So I'm going to need an if. This is going to be my turn score again. Whew, this one's complicated. So I need an if statement. If this value, did I roll a 1, is greater than 0, if I did roll a 1, then I want to pick the maximum value out of all of these values, because I do get to include the 4th roll. Otherwise, I don't get to include that, and I only get the maximum value out of these 3 values over here. Now let's fill that down and take a look at our results. We're going to test this by checking. Did I roll a 1? No, so I only get to include these 3 values. I don't get to include this roll, which would have been the maximum. But notice my turn score is 3. Let's see over here, 2, 4, 1. Yes, I rolled a 1. I get to include this one in my calculation, and it is a 5. This should be the maximum, and it is. It looks like I'm calculating my turn score correctly. And notice that there does seem to be a tendency to get higher values here. I did roll a lot of 1s that time. Now, those are my turn scores, so my total score for the game is going to be, oops, forgot the equal sign again, is the sum of these values right here. Looks like I got 48 points altogether. I wonder if that's typical. We'll have to do some distribution work later to figure out what's common. Okay, so that's it. We have made 2 games. We used a series of functions. We used ran between, we used sum, we used if, and we also used max in this last one to find the maximum value. So I hope that helps to clear up some of the difficulties that we were having today, and we're going to work on game 3 tomorrow. Thanks.